face is a little black.
Mine?
Yeah.
Need a booster seat. Let me see if I can hold my computer down like this. Is that okay?
Oh, that's much better, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll let you guys take it from here.
I ordered this fast.
Get started? Okay.
Yes.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم للصائم فرحتان فرحة عند فطره وفرحة عند لقاء ربه أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. So it's an honor for me to be here today. Thank you very much for the invitation. And today, inshallah, within the 20 minutes I have, I want to speak about a very important aspect of Ramadan that sometimes we miss out on. We focus a lot on the ibadat. We focus a lot on the prayer, the optional prayers, and being in a masjid, doing the i'tikaf. But there's also another aspect of Ramadan that sometimes we overlook. And this goes back to our preparation for the month of Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to prepare us for the month of Ramadan, He gave us the month of Sha'ban. The month of Sha'ban is a month wherein the Prophet ﷺ would fast almost every single day. And there's a special night in the month of Sha'ban wherein the Prophet ﷺ, he said that Allah looks towards His creation and He forgives His whole creation except for two types of people. One is the person who ascribes partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, commits shirk, and the other person is the one who has enmity or hatred in his heart or her heart towards others. So the word that is used is mushahin. Mushahin is the one who has shahna in his heart. Shahna means hatred or enmity, ill will towards others. And so just imagine, this night is known as the 15th night of Sha'ban. So during the 15th night of Sha'ban, Allah will forgive everybody except for the one who has enmity or ill will towards others in his or her heart. And we know that the month of Sha'ban is not as holy as the month of Ramadan. And the 15th night of Sha'ban is not as holy as each of the nights of Ramadan. So just imagine if on the 15th night Allah will not forgive the one who has enmity or ill will in his heart towards others. Just imagine every single night of Ramadan that we spend in praying the Tahajjud prayer or the Taraweeh prayer, and we spend the whole day fasting. But we find out that at the end of all this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not forgiven us. He has not shown His mercy to us. Just imagine, how we would feel. And so that is why just one aspect that we need to focus on, and this is the best time before the month of Ramadan comes in, during the year, in our day-to-day dealings with the people around us, day-to-day dealings with our relatives, with our siblings, sometimes with our parents, sometimes with our siblings, sometimes with our maybe relatives or friends and neighbors. Sometimes a neighbor may have thrown trash onto our property, or their kids may have thrown trash onto our property, or their kids may be throwing their ball over onto our property, and every time you have to go out and throw it back, and all sorts of things happen on a daily basis, sometimes with our neighbors, sometimes with, they could be noisy, right? Or they could have music on all night, partying all night, and we're trying to get to sleep, and at the same time we're we want to say something, but we don't want to say something because the Prophet ﷺ has emphasized being kind to neighbors so much, and you don't want to say something and they may take it in the wrong way, and it might create, some sort of ill will between you two. And sometimes you do say something with the best of intention, but it comes out wrong, and the other person takes it, misconstrues your intentions. And so we are human beings at the end of the day. We make mistakes, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. Sometimes we do things with the best of intentions, but it comes out wrong, or it is misconstrued. And this happens a lot, especially when there's a generation gap, especially between children and parents. I personally happened with me quite a bit with my parents when I would say something with the best of intention, but they would misconstrue it as disrespectful or not listening to them, or something along those lines. And so it reminds me of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after emphasizing the importance of kindness to parents, and that you should not even say oof to them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِن تَكُونُوا صَالِحِينَ فَإِنَّهُ كَانَ لِلْأَوَّابِينَ غَفُورًا. That at the end of the day, رَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا فِي نُفُوسِكُم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what is in your hearts. إِن تَكُونُوا صَالِحِينَ. If you are pious, then Allah is the most forgiving to those who repent. And what is the meaning of that? The meaning of that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands that the relationship between parents and children can sometimes become a bit difficult, especially in old age. And sometimes there'll be a lot of misunderstanding, there'll be a lot of misinterpretation of intentions, and that's going to happen, and it's going to happen for sure. And what happens is that normally children will feel bad about themselves, that, oh, why did I say this, or why did I do that? I made my parents upset. But I said it with the best of intentions. I said it with the most genuine intention, with a clean heart, and still they ended up being upset with me. Why is that? And we become depressed, we become sad. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is providing consolation to us that, look, Allah knows best what's in your hearts. As long as you have a genuine intention, you have a sincere intention, Allah is there. He's watching, He's listening, He knows what's happening, and He understands you more than anybody else. And so turn to Him, and He will forgive you, and He will rectify the situation for you. And so the same will happen with our siblings. The same will happen with our best friends. The same will happen with our colleagues at work, with our boss maybe. And so this is the best time for us to reach out to all those with whom we've had some sort of disagreement with, or we had some sort of ill will with, and try to reach out. And we can't be, Islam doesn't say we have to be best friends with everybody, but at least to the extent where you're able to say Assalamu alaikum to the other person, hi, how are you, something along those lines. At least that much, that's the least we should be able to do with all our brothers and sisters. Whether we agree with them or not, whether they agree with us or not, whether they're of the same, maybe, we find it easier to reach out to those of our own culture, own language, own background. When it comes to others of a different race, different background, different culture, then we tend to be a little bit more, distant and less relenting. And so what we need to do is treat everybody equally, have good feelings and good thoughts towards every single person out there. The Prophet ﷺ was once asked, who is the best of the people? Who is the best of people? The Prophet, peace be upon him, he replied by saying, كُلُّ مَخْمُومِ الْقَلْبِ وَصَدُوقِ اللِّسَانِ. all those who have a clean heart and truthful in their speech. So these are two qualities that we should all aspire to attain. Have a clean heart towards everybody. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that nothing will benefit us on the day of judgment. Our wealth, our children, everything will be left behind. We will go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Right? And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that will help us on the day of judgment, when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one thing that will help us is qalbin salim. Right? Illa man atallaha bi qalbin salim. Except for the one who goes in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a purified heart. Right? A safe heart. Qalbin salim, right? Means a safe heart, a heart that is full of peace, tranquility, no jealousy towards anybody, no rancor, no malice, no hatred, no enmity towards anybody. Person who has love, nothing but love for everybody. And so when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they heard the word mahmum al-qalb coming from the Prophet, peace be upon him, they asked, "O Prophet of Allah, what do you mean by mahmum al-qalb?" So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he described that by saying that the heart that has no rancor, no malice towards anybody. Right? The heart that is full of kullu taqiyyin naqiyyin. The heart that is full of taqwa, full of the awareness of Allah. And naqi means clean. Heart that is clean, purified. Right? There's nothing, no spiritual diseases in that heart. And la ithma fi, there's no sin in that heart. And la hasad wala bughd. There's no jealousy towards anybody and no enmity towards anybody. And this is what the Prophet, peace be upon him, this is what he described as the person who has a clean and purified heart. And so we want to enter Ramadan with a clean heart, and so that each day of Ramadan, each night of Ramadan that we spend fasting and praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our ibadat, everything we do will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so before the month of Ramadan sets in, let's reach out to others, and that way the more our hearts are purified, the more we will be elevated in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our rank will be elevated, and then we can even surpass the angels. Very quickly, going back, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first intended to create the human being, the human race, created Adam, when he intended to create Adam alayhi salam, he mentioned it to the angels, and the angels said, "Are you going to create another creation that's going to spread mischief on the earth and shed blood?" And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "I know what you do not know." And so because the jinn had already been created and they had shed a lot of blood and committed a lot of mischief, the angels said, "Look, we're already here. We're praising you all day. We're glorifying you." To some of us who are in ruku all day, all night. Some of us are in sujood all day, all night. Some of us are in the standing position, praising you all day and all night. What is the purpose of another creation? And Allah said, "I know what you do not know." And so through fasting, when we sacrifice our desires and step on our ego, what we're doing is we're surpassing the angels, because the angels, they are programmed to do only good. They're programmed to do only what Allah commands them to do. So there's no way they can deviate from that, right? So we have the commands, but we can either choose to fulfill those commands or not fulfill those commands. We have free will, right? Angels don't have free will. And so in spite of having the free will, we fulfill the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though we have the choice not to. That continues to elevate our rank, continues to purify us from inside, and a time will come when we will get to a status which will even surpass the angels. When we are able to control ourselves to such an extent that we're refraining from what is permissible. We're refraining from halal. During Ramadan, our cupboards are full of food, our fridges are full of food, right? And food is being cooked at home or ordered, and the food is there ready on the table, but we won't eat until it's Maghrib, until the exact second sets in, right? Until it's Maghrib. If Maghrib is at 8:32, then we'll wait till it's exactly 8:32, not a second before, and then only we will eat and break our fast. What is that? That shows how much restraint we have, right? How much the month of Ramadan is teaching us to restrain ourselves. That even though it's halal, we're not eating it. Why? Because it's the command of Allah. So if during the month of Ramadan we're able to train ourselves to refrain from what is halal, then inshallah, when Allah tells us don't do this, it will become easier for us to not do it. And so that is the purpose of Ramadan, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so that لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, you may attain taqwa. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us all to prepare for the month of Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove all the ill will and all the maybe jealousy or all the evil traits that naturally creep in to us as human beings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove all that from our hearts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us pure hearts. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala embed within our hearts all the good traits, all the noble traits, like love for everybody and forgiveness and mercy towards everybody. Ameen.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Omar. I really love that you talk so much about not just the ritual of Ramadan, but how it impacts your heart and how to come into it. A lot of times we learn about the motions of Ramadan, but really feeling the emotions of Ramadan, I feel is what gives it that richness and that specialness that makes us long for this opportunity to not eat all day for a month, right? So I really love hearing that, and it's such great advice that I hope will make my Ramadan even better. So as you may or may not know, I love Ramadan. Like, I look forward to it all year long. My family knows this very well. I've been, getting them excited about it for about, 4 weeks now. And so I just wanted to share some of the things that are more not ritualistic, but are things that help me to have more meaning in my ritual, and things that I like to share with the people around me as well, my family, so that they can also get not just the experience of fasting and the experience of discipline, but all of the beauty and richness that comes with it. We were talking about earlier the research that shows that 80% of US Muslims actually claim to fast during Ramadan, and that is both foreign-born and US-born. That's a lot of Muslims, considering only about 20% of Muslims even attend a mosque, or only about 40% claim to pray. So that's a really significant number. And so I love that, because that really shows that people are coming into Ramadan ready to try, coming from lots of different starting places, right? People are not coming in perfect, right? That is not the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. He created us all on our own journeys, in our own time, and this month is a chance, wherever you're starting from, to get to a better place. And so that's beautiful. If you're coming from a place where you haven't paid attention to your practice all year long, now it's a fresh start. It is a chance to come to God, and God is waiting for you. And so the first thing I like to do, so I want to talk about kind of 5 different stages. So before Ramadan, the first 10 days, the middle 10 days, and the last 10 days, and then kind of the sunset review of Ramadan, the wrap up, which is kind of making your next step plans. So before Ramadan, I like to sit and first do like an assessment. Think about where I'm at right then, because every year in my life, I've had a different Ramadan. No 2 Ramadans have been the same. When you have a little baby in Ramadan, sometimes it's about maintaining, just making it through getting through, doing as much as you can, but also giving yourself the grace and space to be able to, not do all the things that you might have expected to do before you had kids, right? Now I am of a certain age. My experience during Ramadan will be a little bit different. I don't have little kids that need me to stay up at night. I'm able to manage my schedule and my work in a different way. I have different time management skills than I did when I was younger, which gives me new opportunities. So just thinking about where you are at the beginning of Ramadan before you start helps you to understand where you want to be, right? And not comparing it to other people, right? I am a part of this Facebook group called Ramadan Eats and Crafts. Don't know if you're on it. If you like those things, check it out, because there are lots of Eid crafts and Ramadan crafts, and there are some people on there that I don't even know that we are made of the same thing, right? Like, they have built miniature masjids inside of their home for their children. They have advent calendars of all sorts that are now apparently Ramadan calendars. There are lots of people who put lots of time into their crafting and such, and their food planning. I don't compare myself to them because we're not starting in the same place, right? We don't have the same priorities. Our end goal won't be the same. Our starting place isn't the same. So figuring out your own goals, not compared to anybody else, but compared to where you're starting at. So be honest with yourself on where you're starting, and that will help you to figure out where you want to be. And I like to think about it in lots of different areas, right? Like thinking about where I'm starting with knowledge, right? It's a chance to increase. Where I'm starting with practice, with behavior that I want to show to my family or to my, at work, and those kind of things that deal with how I live a life that's pleasing to God in demonstration, right? In the real world, in my everyday life. Or when it comes to how much I engage in my community or do for my community or others. And setting those goals, like in 3 or 4 areas, and things that are specific that I can spend 15 minutes a day working on and see a difference over a month, right? Because even just 15 minutes a day, we all have 15 minutes a day. Even those of us who don't have a minute in the day, we have 15 minutes. And just figuring out what is that you can dedicate to improve your condition in 15 minutes a day and work for it every day. And sometimes that also means identifying who around you is there to support you in becoming better during this month, into really reaching your potential during this month. And identifying what challenges you have so you can be prepared to overcome those and meet those. Part of that is figuring out who are the people around you that will help you to meet your goal of improving yourself. And making sure that you spend time with those people and have those people in your life. And then the next thing is something that I think is so important before starting Ramadan, before it even begins, is making your du'a list. That's part of that assessment of where you're at. When you make your assessment and figure out like where your opportunities are and where there are things that you feel like you have deficiencies, it's an opportunity to ask God to help you with those, right? He created us in a way where He knows our weaknesses, and He created us, imperfect in our seeking perfection, but in constant imperfection. And so being honest with ourselves and being honest with God and using that opportunity in dua every single day to ask God for what it is where it is that we are hungry in our lives and in our hearts, that we need God to help us find nourishment. And writing that down in your dua list. And that's something that if you look at your dua list from year to year, it's amazing to see how God has fulfilled the things that once you yearned for and craved so much in your life, and then now you have them a year later or 5 years later or after a period of time. It's a way to really see your growth over time and see the bounty in your life in a new way. So making that all clear on paper. And I know sometimes we think, I have it in my mind. But it is so different when you write things down than if you have it in your mind. And you forget over time. It's easy to not see change and progress in your life, but when you write it down, you have that opportunity to come back with a fresh mind at a later time and see all of the grace that's in your life. The next thing is that it's really important to plan ahead. So in two ways. One, planning ahead before Ramadan begins with setting your goals and how you're going to do things, but also keeping that planning day by day, right? Refreshing that intention every day. The night before you go to bed, making your plan for what you're going to do tomorrow, where you're going to fit your 15 minutes in, where what your goals are and how you're going to meet those goals each day in really small yet significant ways. And then the last thing before Ramadan, you might think it's silly, and maybe it is, but I really think that having the right frame of mind goes a long way, and the message that you tell yourself and the message that you tell others really has an impact. So thinking about what your elevator pitch is for Ramadan, right? Like, what is the little message you're telling yourself or telling others when they're asking, like, oh, how is your Ramadan going? Or, what is your, what's your Ramadan like? I shared with many people that I saw a friend last week who told me, like, you're the only Muslim I've ever met who likes Ramadan. Like, everyone I know hates Ramadan. Like, they hate the fasting part. They do it, but they do it with, like, a scorn, like, with, they're like, yeah, we do it, but it sucks, right? And it really, like, took me back. I was like, man, I felt a little like defensive about Ramadan, like, hey, no, you don't understand. But then I realized, yeah, I think a lot of people really have that feeling and that sense, and there are lots of different reasons, but I think also is the way that they see it, right? They don't see the benefit for them in the short or the long term, and it's an inconvenience, and it is, a big change, as it's supposed to be, right? It does shake up your life, and it's like a reset button, right? And not everybody is ready for that hard reset. So I think having that elevator speech in your mind of, like, in a sentence, like, why you're fasting, knowing it for yourself and being able to communicate it with others, and how you feel about it, right? And if you don't feel good about it, maybe figuring out why that is, and at least trying to reframe what benefit you're getting from it. So having, like, just one succinct statement about how you feel about Ramadan or how you want to feel about Ramadan going in that you can tell yourself goes a long way with helping you to, to have a different experience than maybe what you've had in the past if you have not had an experience that you think is positive or brings you benefit, right? So you gotta tell me. I'll read in the comments if people think it's silly or not silly, but I don't know. I'd love to hear it. If you have an elevator pitch or a little, like, a reframing, I would love to hear what it is. And then, so, the month of Ramadan is broken down into the first 10 days of mercy and then forgiveness and salvation. And so I really like to feel those different parts of Ramadan in very intentional ways. And so for the first 10 days of mercy, I see that as seeking and offering mercy, right? Like, seeking God's mercy is so important for us, and showing mercy to others is so important. So thinking about how does that look in everyday life, right? How is that something that you can do very intentionally during those first 10 days? Maybe it can be one of those 15-minute things that you're working on, but doing something very specific. You can do it by yourself or with your family. And then also very intentionally allowing yourself to feel God's mercy, right? We think a lot, especially if you're a caretaker, you take care of others all the time. We think of how we treat others and, we ask God for mercy, but do we show ourselves that mercy? I think taking time to be very aware of that, it goes a long way. And the same goes for in the second 10 days of forgiveness, right? We should very intentionally seek God's forgiveness and very intentionally offer forgiveness. Like Sheikh Omar said, how important it is to clear your heart and clean your heart and give that forgiveness to others, and how that really impacts you as well. But also to forgive yourself, right? be very thoughtful and aware of the ways that forgiveness has played a part in your own development, your own life, and take time to forgive yourself. In one of the previous sessions we had with Muslim Space, there was a section, or there was an event that talked about relationships, and the therapist that was there, Mustarad, she talked about how when you do something wrong and you really want to beat yourself up about it and like think about it over and over again as a way to convince yourself you're not going to do it again, but that's not the way that we work. That's not the way that God created us. Instead, we have to acknowledge it and then let it go. And that makes us less likely to repeat bad patterns than to hold on to it again and again and again, beating ourselves up for it. And so really in those second 10 days, taking time to forgive ourselves, you know, show that grace that we would show to others, to ourselves as well. And then in the third 10 days, when we focus on salvation, you know, we think about, you know, part of the articles of our faith, you know, we believe in heaven and hell, and taking time to think about what that means and planning for our eternal life as well is so important in this time. And if you know, sometimes we think about making every day in our lives as the best possible. We think about building our wealth, our 401k, but thinking about our future planning as well. So important in this time where we have that opportunity to not just focus on what's in front of us, but focus on, are we really living a life that's pleasing to God? And really thinking about everything that we've done in those days that have come before us and what we want to do going forward. And then in wrapping up Ramadan, it's such a good time after Ramadan is done to think about what changed since your initial assessment, right? If you did that first Ramadan preparation of thinking about what it is, where it is that you are in your life and where you want to be, and then thinking about what is different after a month of trying very intentionally to do better and be better. And figure out, did you find your growing edge during Ramadan? Did you find out where you can improve or where you did improve? And then thinking about just planning going forward, how you're going to carry everything that you have gained during Ramadan, all of that extra understanding of your strength and your willpower and your determination and your commitment to living a life pleasing to God, how that's something that you are going to help carry you until the next Ramadan, where hopefully you will have a complete refresh and the opportunity to reset and move forward from wherever you're starting in the next year. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Any questions?
Any online questions?
No online questions. I do have questions.
Okay.
Okay, so this is different for everybody, but for me, when I get around day 20, I hit that low point. Right?
Yeah.
It's really just, those are those hard days. Do you have any advice on how to get over that hump?
The awesome part is that, like, day 20, that's when you start having the communal qiyam al-layl. Like, that's like a whole different level, you know? And so getting that like second wind of enthusiasm when you have the opportunity to do something you would never do during the rest of the year, right? During the rest of the year, you are never going to the mosque at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and, you know, praying with everyone, right? So that is that, like, okay, not only are you like exhausted and, you know, like so at the edge, but now you're like stepping up your practice one more, you know, doing something that is only going to happen during this month, right? And it's so unique because you're already so tired that you're in a different place emotionally and things touch you a different way, or at least for me, they definitely do, because I'm usually so tired by then, that when I go during Ramadan for Qiyam al-Layl and I hear, like, they dim the lights, it's very, you know, like calm and serene, and, you know, and inevitably, you know, during the dua and, you know, at the end, you know, there's going to be crying, and that is something we never do as a community, other than during, you know, when someone passes away. When do we come together and cry in humility in front of God as a community, right? That's something we usually do very privately, right? But to come together in community and be so humbled that you are in tears, that gives you a second wind. Or for me, it definitely does, because it feels like, okay, this is something special. You know, this is something that's only going to happen during this time. This is a special time. So.
That's great. I like it when you break it down into 3 parts. It makes it a lot more easier to approach.
All right.
Anything, you guys have anything? There's one just sort of a general question. Is there a calendar I can download with prayer times and the dua list, or the dua for suhoor and iftar? So maybe that's something that we could probably post, but is there any?
Most of the mosques have calendars that are posted, and also IslamicFinder.com has like the local prayer times, and it has like the list of du'as and stuff too. You can search as well. IslamicFinder.com. And also, if you go to that Facebook page, Ramadan Crafts and whatever it's called, they have 1,000,001, I don't know, resources to make every decorative Ramadan related item you could imagine. I'm sure it also includes some type of calendar.
Also concerning beginning of fast, some websites and some even timetables will list a dua to be recited, but there is no dua that's being reported in the hadith. It's actually what they write in Arabic. It's Bisawmi ghadin nawaitu min shahri Ramadan, which actually means I have intended to keep the fast of tomorrow's fast of the month of Ramadan. It's actually an intention. The wording is actually, it's not a dua. You're not asking Allah for anything. You're making an intention. You're verbalizing the intention, and it's not necessary to verbalize the intention. Waking up for suhoor is an intention by itself. Because why else are you awake at 4 a.m. in the morning, right? So your actions can also be an intention. You know, you're walking to the masjid, for example, and you're standing up for the prayer. That's intention, right? Your actions can substitute for intention. So it's not necessary. Some cultures, they emphasize the verbalization of the intention, which is not necessary. If it helps you in your worship, then that's okay. But to consider it necessary or to consider it a sunnah, it's not established. There is no specific wording that's been established in any hadith. There's no specific dua. Yeah, it's a time of dua. You can make as much dua as you want in Arabic or any language, whatever you're comfortable with. However, when you're breaking your fast, there are certain duas that have been mentioned in the hadith. Like for example, ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله, which means thirst has gone away, and the veins have become wetted, and وثبت الأجر, and the reward has been established, inshallah, with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's established, that's in the hadith. And also, Allahumma laka sumt wa ala rizqika aftart. O Allah, for you I have fasted, and upon your sustenance I am breaking my fast. So that's being reported as well. There are a couple of other du'as that have also been mentioned. So when you're breaking your fast, that's a time when du'as are accepted. So we should try to step away from the stove, just what do you call it? I would say at the time, get all the cooking and everything taken care of in the morning or in the afternoon, especially on the weekend when we have more time. And so the time between Asr and Maghrib, try to utilize that just in doing whatever you can, remembering Allah, reciting the Quran, or making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know culturally, in our culture, we all that, we try to, all the samosas and kebabs and all that, we prepare it ahead of time for the month of Ramadan. So Ramadan is not all about the food. It's about trying to elevate yourself spiritually. And husbands should sort of remind their wives as well that, we don't care about the food. What we care about is your health. We care about your spiritual well-being. And so it's okay. Sometimes, women, wives, they stress out before Ramadan. Oh, I'm not ready. I haven't cooked anything. I haven't made anything. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. It's not all about the food. Ramadan is about the spirituality.
I have a question, Sheikh Omar. So in different cultural practices, most people, you break your fast and then you go and pray Maghrib and then you eat. But there are some cultures where you, when it's time to break fast, you eat if the food is on the table, and then you pray the Maghrib.
Yeah.
So I know because people get very entrenched in culture, if they are, in an environment where something different than what they are used to practicing, it throws them off. What do you think is the...
Both are acceptable. There are different ways to go about with it. I mean, you can, some prefer to have dates and water only, and then they'll pray first, and then they'll have the full meal. Or some will have the full meal first, and then they'll pray. Either way is fine. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did say that when food is in front of you and you're hungry, you should eat first and then pray. Maybe that's also something that you can look into. So whatever your preference is. I know in some places they'll announce that it's time to break your fast, or they'll beat on the drums and people will break their fast first, and then like 10 minutes later they'll have the azan, and then they'll have the prayer. So you have like the 10.
There's not one way that the Prophet did it. There's not one way that he did it all the time.
So we don't know exactly what happened, what sequence they followed in those days. What we do know for sure is that as soon as Maghrib was set in, they would break their fast. And because that was something that that was a concession that Allah gave to this ummah, because the other ummah, they would have to fast till night. Till like later on. And so for us, we break our fast as soon as night sets in, and that's the time of Maghrib. And so we know that they would break their fast at that time. Now, did they give the azan exactly at that time or not? We don't know the exact sequence. That's why any sequence you follow would be acceptable.
Okay. Maybe we also add, because so many ways are acceptable, that when we're at someone else's house, maybe you just respect their custom and their culture.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you're at somebody's house, just follow their way, whatever.
And I think that's so important, because I think sometimes we get so caught up in details that we forget to have manners, right? We forget to have good behavior and respect, our hosts, and because we're so adamant of have to go right now, when actually that is not showing good manners.
So we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One's an easy one. They'd like to know, where did you get your stats?
That's the Pew Research, and actually I just read it from an article that Omar Suleiman wrote for Yaqeen Institute. So if you go to Yaqeen Institute website, you'll be able to see it. It's one that he wrote like today. I think it actually might even be on CNN. It's a really good article because he says in it, it's about, look, don't worry if you're eating in front of your Muslim coworker, because they're not stressed out about it. Don't you be stressed out about it, because it's part of our practice. It doesn't make us feel extra hungry or things like that. That it is okay, and it's not something that others should be concerned with.
I think that's a great one.
It was a really good article. I recommend it as a good one to share with others.
We will share it
People
with
of
us.
us. Awesome.
And bring that up, I remember growing up culturally, in my culture especially, and I'm sure a lot of other cultures that share the same cultural thing, that it's haram to eat in front of a fasting person. How many of you were told that it's haram to eat in front of a fasting person? in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there's actually a hadith that mentioned the Prophet, peace be upon him, sitting with his disciples, and some of them are sitting there eating. The Prophet, peace be upon him, is saying, I am fasting today, you go ahead and eat. Right? So they're sitting together, around the same, tablecloth, right? Some of them are eating, some of them are not eating, some of them are fasting. The Prophet, peace be upon him, himself is fasting, and he's telling disciples, you go ahead and eat. Right? And so I guess it's an etiquette that's being taken too far in our culture. And I even heard that some Muslims at work tell their non-Muslim co-workers to not eat in front of them. And I think that's going too far. We should try to provide comfort and make it as easy as possible for the people around us. And so our fasting should not affect other people, right? That's not the purpose of fasting. The fasting is for ourselves, right? And so it shouldn't affect other people. And so if there's a coworker sitting next to you on his table in front of his computer and he's eating away, let him eat. Why should that affect you? Don't let it affect you. If that's affecting you, then there's something wrong with your fasting. So I consider it a transgression to expect other people to not eat in front of you just because you're fasting. It's better not to fast then. Your fasting should not affect other people's lives. They should not interfere with other people's lives. So if they want to eat, let them eat. Yeah, on a personal basis, if you know that somebody's fasting, then you want to try to stay away from eating in front of them, if possible. But if it's not possible, then it's okay. What you don't want to do is, grab a chocolate bar and tempt them, or go like this or something like that. That's something that you don't want to do. But other than that, there's nothing wrong with eating in front of a fasting person. It's not haram. Yes, out of respect, just to prevent the other person from being tempting. If you're a Muslim and you want to stay away from that, then that's fine. But to expect others who are not obligated to fast, who are not Muslims, to expect them to not eat in front of you, then that's not something. I know culturally as well, the women normally would hide themselves during Ramadan when they're not fasting, and they would hide themselves and so that nobody sees them eating. That's not necessary. You can eat, in front of people, and if children ask, then explain to them that, Allah tells me not to fast. So that's why I'm not fasting, right? So it's not when you during Ramadan. That's another thing about women, hiding during Ramadan when they're not fasting, or they're trying to hide it from their children that they're not fasting. I don't think that's necessary. I think children need to be taught that it's okay that you're not fasting, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's just something that Allah has commanded us.
Thank you. Okay, we've got some more questions. How do we talk to someone who is Muslim but doesn't feel like Ramadan and fasting is for them?
Well, I mean, it's not by judging them or telling them that they should fast, usually not going to make them fast. It's like telling a person who's upset to calm down, never works like that, right? So I think a good place to always come from when you're trying to understand someone is asking them. Ask questions about maybe why they don't want to fast, right? If you are a person who cares for them and has a relationship with them and, wants to really understand them. Not asking so that you can change their mind or convince them otherwise, because that is not your role, right? Your role is to definitely take care of your own self and then, be there for others, but not be there to convince others or change their mind or, try and, take over their responsibility for themselves, because it's not your responsibility. But I think whenever you see a person who's in a different place in their life and or is maybe struggling or maybe has something that they would like some input on, I think just starting by asking a question and trying to understand where they're coming from is a good place, because maybe it's something that, you know, you can provide some support with, and maybe it's not. But I think first, at least trying to understand a person that you have a relationship with is good. If it's somebody that you don't know and you don't have a relationship and you're just being Ramadan police about, then just don't, because that's not going to be good for them. It's not going to be good for you. We want to really embrace each other and support each other more than police each other, right? That's not how people come to feel more connected to God or to you or to community. So yeah, if it's something that's, you don't have an existing relationship with that person, there's not that love, then don't. Does that make sense, Sheikh Omar? Is that okay?
Of course. And I think the key word here is what you mentioned, that you know, every person has her own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever they're comfortable with, whatever level they're comfortable with, you know, be at that level, and the rest of us should appreciate it and be grateful for it. And at the end of the day, all schools of thought agree that, you know, a person who doesn't pray, doesn't fast, doesn't give zakat, doesn't do any of the pillars of Islam, is a Muslim, right? So the main thing here is that you're a Muslim, Allah loves you, and just know that Allah loves you and we all love you. And
you know, Sheikh Omar, I wish we are so lucky to have you, and I wish that message was given in every mosque every day, because I don't feel like enough people hear that really need to hear that. You know, that it's not our place to decide. If a person is Muslim, they're Muslim, right? It's not for us to grade them on it or to judge them on it, and that it's their own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that matters.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Next question. Other than the Holy Quran, what do you recommend? What do you recommend spiritual readings? What other spiritual readings would you recommend during Ramadan, in addition to the Quran, along with Quran?
That's a good question.
If I can, I feel like there are a lot of really good books out right now, and it depends on what your interest is, right? I think find something that resonates with you. You know, we heard the author that came previously, Dr. Tamara Gray. She wrote some really good books and brought some other really good ones that are highly recommended. Going to the websites of the organizations that you align yourselves with usually have really good references. Going to something like Seekers Hub or other sites where you get where you get information about things that are relevant to you are a great resource to see what's coming out, because there are always new things coming out that are so interesting and intriguing, and are very specialized, that everybody can find something that's interesting to them.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yes.
One of my children is ready for her first Ramadan, first year of fasting. But she's not the kind who, okay, I'm ready to go for it. She's kind of like, oh no, I need to drink. So how am I going to deal with that? It's a parenting question as well as my question. But how do I deal with that? You're telling her, no, I know you're hungry, I know you're thirsty, but you're not going to eat or drink. So what are the protocols of what I would say or wouldn't say, whatever obligations, I guess, at that age, just start.
Yeah, well, for my kids, I get them excited about Ramadan. So they're always asking me, can I fast? Can I fast? Can I fast this time? And so what I usually do is say, yes, you can fast. And so I don't tell them to fast, but I try and get them excited so they feel like everybody else is doing it, like from the time they're little, I'll say, when you're older, you can wake up with us in the morning for sahur. And when they're little, they get very excited about waking up in the middle of the night. not so much now, when you're older, but when you're little, the idea of having, pancakes at 4 a.m. is very exciting. And so, it's something that I think my littlest now is already excited about, because it makes them feel like they're mature and they're older and they have, like they can do it. And I think when I look back to my own experience as a kid, I think what always like drew me to want to fast was feeling like, oh my gosh, people think I can't do this, but I can so do this, right? And so I see that in my kids as well, thinking like, my 11-year-old, she doesn't have to fast, but she's like, can I do all of Ramadan this year? Can I do every day? And, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, hold on, girl, you're going to have to do it later, and take your time. But they get that sense of accomplishment from it. And I think celebrating the accomplishment, even when they do a half day, like if they can only do until noon, set that goal, say, oh, you can do it until 12 o'clock or whatever. And then when they do it, celebrate them, and then say, okay, when you do a full day, maybe we can all go out to Red Robin or wherever. I don't know, my kids always like Red Robin when they're little.
Still working
So,
if they're required, obligated, because she's already.
oh, if they're older, I'll leave that to Sheikh Omar, I don't know.
She's already obligated to do it.
Oh, okay.
She was eager when she was younger, yes, but now she's between.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to be honest, my experience with my daughters, it was the same. Basically, when they're younger, they would wake up with us, and then they would start to fast. But then sometimes they would, get hungry. They would eat, but sometimes they would finish the fast as well. So we would, have them skip one meal, just to get them into the habit. And then I think by about 7, 8, they're able to fast. And so they begin like maybe the first year they'll keep about 5 fasts, and then the next year a little bit more, and then a little bit more until they're about, I would say 12, 13, then they're able to keep all of them. And so this year is going to be challenging because their finals, the STAR exam is going to be like on the first day of Ramadan is going to be their STAR exam. And even for the college going youth, I think their finals are also in the first 2 weeks of Ramadan is going to be their finals. And so this is going to be challenging. It's going to be very challenging. I remember at Nueces Mosque, we had a professor night at Nueces Mosque, and we invited some of the professors. So I mentioned that to them that, so they actually asked, what can we do for the students during the month of Ramadan? And I said, we're not asking for any special favors. They need to be treated the same as other students. But, if they're in class or they're taking an exam and, it's time for them to break their fast, then let them have some snacks in front of them. Let them have water at least, and some dates and some snacks or some, power bars or whatever, so that they can have that. So at least give them that time so they can have that, and just give them some time so that they can pray their Maghrib prayer. And so, we don't, as Muslims, we don't want to ask for special favors just because we're worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, we have to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are certain rules we have to follow. And so, most professors are very open to that. Most teachers are very open to that. As long as we don't take advantage. Now, I was told about one particular individual Muslim teenager, very passionate about his religion, but sometimes a bit too passionate. And so, he would take time off from his class for the Dhuhr prayer during his middle school years and high school years, but he would sometimes be gone for like an hour, right? And so you don't need an hour for the Dhuhr prayer, right? So he would like take 15 minutes to do wudu, then he would take half an hour to pray, So that's going too far. That's taking advantage of, something that the teacher is allowing us for the sake of our religion, going beyond her way to allow us to do that, and then we take advantage of it. That's not good as well. So, the Dhuhr prayer can be offered within 10 minutes. Easily, you can make wudu and offer the Dhuhr prayer within 10 minutes. You don't have to fulfill all the etiquettes. You just fulfill what is necessary within 10 minutes. I remember there were a group of teenagers at Westwood High School. They would offer the Jummah prayer within 10 minutes. 10-minute Jummah prayer. On every Friday, teacher would give them some time and they would have a special room and they would offer the Jummah prayer and within 10 minutes. And so, there's a lot of flexibility in our religion. We don't have to be like how it is in the masjid where they spend 45 minutes on a khutbah. It can be done in 10 minutes. The farad is the main thing. So even if you don't have 10 minutes, you only have 5 minutes, even in 5 minutes you can offer the Dhuhr prayer. So like I said, there's a lot of flexibility in our religion and we need to avail of that, especially when we're living in a non-Muslim country. And so, getting the kids motivated, I think, like what we did this year, now the two older ones, they're a bit too old, but for the youngest one, we had this like sort of, she made a rocket and we had like a countdown to Ramadan, like so we had like the 30 days or 29 days of Shaban, and then so every day she would take one thing out and then, what did you do today, just like what did you do to prepare for Ramadan, and so it's just one of the things you can do to motivate your children for Ramadan. And at the end of the day, I think it's the parents. If the parents are fasting, then your children will want to fast as well. So it's how you are at home. If you're getting along with your spouse, the children they'll grow up with that love and compassion within them. Sometimes I just feel so, and this is where I'm really grateful for sisters like Sister Yasmin and Muslim Space, that they reach out to sisters and they want to make sure that every sister is being respected and treated with the dignity that she deserves. And so sometimes when I hear about what happens at home within couples, it saddens me so much that how much, sometimes we just don't think about the things we say, and even within religious families, verbal abuse is so common, and sometimes, we don't think that, or sometimes even I don't know, sometimes I just feel that they're saying it deliberately. But the amount of damage we cause through our mouths, what we say for the smallest of things, it's incredible. And I think that's why I like to emphasize that, more than praying all day and fasting, we need to be mindful of every single word that comes out of our mouth, what we say to our spouse, what we say to our children, what we say to our parents, what we say to our relatives, what we say to all those around us. Measure and weigh every single word you say, and then think about it later. That, was this the right thing to say? Could I have said it differently? And then what can I do in the future so that I don't say it like this again in the future? Or if it was hurtful to somebody, then I need to apologize. So I think working on verbal abuse, or how to stay away from verbal abuse, making sure that every single word that comes out of our mouth is not hurting anybody. I think that the impact that has, right, is something that I think we underestimate. Verbal abuse will carry on into our children. Our children will repeat the same things. I hear children say certain things about certain cultures that I know they could not have learned in the United States. Here's a youth who was born and brought up in the United States. He's saying this about a culture overseas. So some negative, we have some, all cultures have their negatives. And so using this to put down a certain culture, you only learn that if you're living in that culture. You can never learn it over here living in the United States. And so I know right away that he picked up this particular word or denigrating term from his parents. I could tell right away. There's no way he could have learned about it in school, in public school, right? Certain words that we use in our culture, in our languages, to denigrate other other races, other colors. And so there's no way we could have learned that except through our parents. I mean, I learned a lot of things, negatives about other cultures through my parents, right? And so we need to be careful that do we really want our children to learn those things that we learned, the negatives that we learned? Do we want our children to have that same level of hate that we have in our culture towards others? So, or do we want our children to be mentally healthy, psychologically healthy, and to grow up with nothing but love inside them? So, I think it all begins with what we say at home, how we are with our spouse at home. That has the biggest impact on our children. And if we want our children to follow our way, then you have to set the right example. You can't, I mean, children pick up, they have a special radar for hypocrisy. They can pick up hypocrisy right away. And once they see that hypocrisy, they will lose that trust in you, and it'll be very hard to regain that trust.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions before we go back? Okay. All right, we've got another question here. What can you do to compensate if you were unable to fast?
What was it? I'm sorry?
What can you do to compensate if you were unable to fast?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. Should I answer that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are two main schools of thought concerning compensating for the fast. So there are certain categories that each person falls into. So for example, if you are ill, you're healthy, you're otherwise healthy, you're young and healthy, you're able to fast, but you just fall ill. For example, you get a fever or flu during the month of Ramadan, or you get some other temporary illness that you will recover from. But that illness is such that you're not able to fast. So it's okay to skip the fast, but you have to make up for it outside of Ramadan. So this illness, or if you're traveling. So if you're traveling, you're not fasting, then you have to make up for it outside of Ramadan. And so as long as you're young and healthy, you have to make up for it outside of Ramadan. If you didn't make up for it and now you've reached old age, or now you have a permanent illness because of which you cannot fast, then you give the same amount that you give for Sadaqatul Fitr on a daily, for each fast you missed. So just say you missed 1 week of fasting, so you give Sadaqatul Fitr for each fast that you missed. So 7 times, nowadays it's like about $5, so 7 times $5. That's how much you give to the poor. That's for those. And similarly, the sisters who cannot fast during the month of Ramadan, they have to make up for it outside of Ramadan as well. Now there are two schools of thought. One is that you have till the end of your life to make up for it, or until you reach old age, or until you reach the age when you're no longer able to fast again, then you have to make up for it. There is no monetary compensation for that as long as you make up for it. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought says that you have to make up for it before the next Ramadan comes along. And if you don't make up for it before the next Ramadan comes along, then after the next Ramadan you make up for it and you give a monetary compensation as well for each fast that you miss, which is the same amount of Sadaqatul Fitr. Okay, does that make sense? Now, sometimes there are sisters who are expecting. Now, those sisters who are expecting, they're allowed to not fast. And every sister is going to be different. So try to refrain from judgment. I remember once when I said this, a sister came up to me and said, well, when I was expecting my children, every single children I had during the month of Ramadan, and I fasted and nothing happened to me, and I'm like, okay, that's good, very good, you fasted, that's good. But every sister goes through a different set of challenges while they're expecting, and so some are able to fast, some are not able to fast. For some it may be dangerous to fast, so it's better for them not to fast. So the concession is there for them, so they can avail of the concession, and then while they're breastfeeding as well, they don't have to fast. So what can happen is that one Ramadan they're expecting, the next Ramadan they're breastfeeding, and then the next Ramadan they're still breastfeeding, next Ramadan they may be expecting again, and then breastfeeding, and then breastfeeding, and then next Ramadan they may be, and so that can happen as well. And so they can have multiple Ramadans through which that they have to make up for. And so at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you have to try your best, right? So you're trying your best to make up for all of them. And like I said, you follow the school of thought that says you have till the end of your life to make up for them. So try your best to make up for them. Take advantage of the winter months when the days are shorter. Make up for your fast then. And again, at the end of the day, you have to try your best. And if you're not able to make up for them and you reach old age or you have a permanent illness because of which you cannot fast, then you give a monetary compensation for each fast that you miss. Now there are some young people who cannot fast because they have, like, for example, diabetes, and they're not able to fast because of that. And so for them as well, because they cannot make up for it outside of Ramadan, for them there's a monetary compensation for each fast that you miss. You give about $5 for each fast you miss, and inshallah that will compensate for the fast that you missed.
Okay, last question. I think this will be the last question of the evening, and this unfortunately is going to end on kind of a heavier note. But with all that's going on right now, with all the violence in the houses of God, this is causing some fear with folks, understandably so, who may be even afraid to go to the masjid. So, how can we get peace in our hearts to go to pray, to worship, without being scared or worrying, and remain focused in our prayers?
So, when I was really little, really little, I'm a little bit old, but I'm not that old, there were lots of crises overseas, right? I think it was like Libya, and I know during the Iraq War. And I remember going to the mosque and listening to the answering machine messages, and there were, at that time, threats were going to come and bomb you, we're going to come and do all kinds of things, right? Very similar to now, but probably now people know much more about the dangers and the threats, but those were very real then, right? And so that has always been a reality, unfortunately, right? That's always been something that was possible, right? And so, and it's not just at the mosque, right? If you work at a university, a lot of times you're scared every time you go towards the end of the semester when kids are, not doing well, not getting the grades that they want, having struggles, right? That's a reality at our universities as well. And having peace in your heart is having peace in your heart no matter what's going on externally, right? We never know if it's on our drive to the masjid, on our drive home, which is so dangerous, right? Driving at night, especially on weekends, you never know what can happen to you, right? I remember once I was getting my appendix out and I called my relative and they said, you never know when your last minute is, which is like not super comforting. And I feel like it's the same now. Like I don't have the most comforting things of saying of like, that's never gonna be a possibility. But I think one, you tie your camel, right? You make sure that those cameras are working at the mosque. You make sure that you have precautions. You make sure that you have security. You make sure that you have procedures that people know and can abide by. But then the second part is to just have that peace in your heart and know that live every minute, with the understanding that you never are promised the next one. I think both of those things work together. Making sure that your mosque is following every step that they can, and there are a lot, to make sure that they are doing everything they can to keep you safe while you're there, but also preparing your heart to know that you are never promised the next day, you're never promised your next Ramadan, So having that mindset every day, wherever you're at the mosque, at school, at the post office, wherever you are, I think is the only way to live. You can't live in fear all the time, When there were shootings at the AME church, and people were afraid to go, you know what? All of my neighbors got together and went. right, went to that church, right? Obviously, I don't go to church generally, but just because we wanted to let them know that we are in solidarity and we don't want other people to hesitate to go to their place of worship, and the same for us, right? I wouldn't want to be hesitant to go to the mosque or to have my family go to the mosque because of what could happen, because we cannot be afraid to live because we're afraid to die, right? So.
Anything else to add, Sheikh? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think we recently had a death in our community of a very well-known, prominent doctor, Dr. Fida Khan, and that sort of shook the medical community, non-Muslim as well as Muslim. I remember I went to a non-Muslim doctor and he told me about it. He said he got the messages and he really wanted to attend the funeral, but he wasn't able to. And so it shook the medical community, especially the Muslim medical community in the greater Austin area. And I think what we need to do is, apart from what Sister Yasmin mentioned, is talk about death more often. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, remember abundantly the destroyer of Ladhat, destroyer of what would be the best way of saying Ladhat? The destroyer of pleasures.
Happiness.
The destroyer of pleasures, right? Remember abundantly the destroyer of pleasures. And what is the destroyer of pleasures? Death. Death is the destroyer of pleasures. Especially when you're at a young age and you're successful in your career, you're climbing the corporate ladder, or you're a successful doctor or a lawyer, and the wealth is coming in, and so you expect to live longer. You have young kids, and it's natural. I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, I wouldn't want to die tomorrow because I want to see my kids grow up. I want to see my kids get married, start their families, right? So we naturally want to live long lives, and there's nothing wrong with that, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that the fortunate one is the one who has a long life and abundant good deeds. And so we want that for us, but at the same time, the reality is that it's not in our control. And what's not in our control, we have to learn to accept it. And by remembering death more often, inshallah, that will help us prepare, so that the last thing you want is that if a death happens in your family, you become so depressed to the extent that you're no longer of any use to the others who depend on you, right? So remember, there are others who depend on you, there are others who love you, and so for their sake, you have to try your best to gather the strength and courage to cope. And for the sake of the young ones, for the sake of the minors, you have to be strong, and you have to be there for them, so that they are, they have a healthy upbringing. If they constantly see you depressed, then that's going to depress them as well, and that's going to affect their upbringing. It's going to affect them in every aspect of their life. And so you want to, at the same time, feel the pain, and there's nothing wrong with feeling the pain, there's nothing wrong with shedding tears, but at the same time, you don't want it to affect your children. You don't want to affect those who love you, you don't want it to affect those who depend on you.
Thank you. Any last words?
Just one more thought on that is that it's very humbling, and I lived in Palestine for a while, and so it is, I'm used to the feeling of, wondering about what the next second will bring. And I think that during Ramadan, if we do have that anxiety, like bringing that to God and understanding that that is something that people around the world are experiencing, and that's not something that, is our misfortune, right? That is something that, unfortunately, is one of those sad connections that we share around the world with many others and people of other faiths as well, especially right now. I think it's a very humbling thought in the unity that comes from that, that unfortunate sadness in the world right now and darkness in the world right now. But my final thought is I'm very excited about Ramadan. I hope you're excited about Ramadan. And I'm really excited about all the great things that Muslim Space has planned. It's like filled up my calendar for Ramadan. It's basically like the limit of my extent of going out during Ramadan is all of the great activities that you have planned. So I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you very much for letting me share my Ramadan joy.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Anything to close it out?
A lot of people ask about getting your blood taken out. There's nothing wrong with getting your blood drawn during fasting. That doesn't break your fast. You can't intake anything from your mouth that goes into your stomach. So that's the main thing to remember. Like, taking blood out is okay. Even somebody was asking about iron infusion. Iron infusion is alright as well because it's not directly going into your stomach. So if there is some sort of medication that is injected directly into your stomach, that would break the fast. But other than that, that would not break the fast. And just like to make dua that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the ability to make the most of this Ramadan, inshallah. So may this Ramadan be the best Ramadan for you, and may every other Ramadan be better than the previous one, inshallah. Ameen.
All right. Thank you, Sheikh Omar.
You're welcome.
That was really
You're
good.
welcome.